there's consequences to who wins elections, needless to say. So we're here tonight to dive into some issues we all care about. There were 16 different sponsoring organizations, all of whom care deeply about our environment, our climate, conservation, road management, all of the things that make this region so special. And that's what we want to talk about tonight. I want to thank all of you for coming, because not enough people care enough to even come out to something like this oftentimes, and yet it's vitally important as we decide who will be our next leadership. I want to thank all our partners who helped sponsor the 16 organizations. I won't name them all, but I will name Kim, Yo, and Kyra. Where are you? Then I want to thank our three candidates: John Wilson, Claudia Balducci, Girmay, Zahilay. Easier than Kiwanis. I hope everybody realizes how difficult it is to be an elected official these days. First, to run for office takes an enormous amount of effort and sacrifice. They're here tonight away from their families. Second, even if you win, no matter what you do, someone's going to think you're wrong and always criticize and attack you. So I do want to commend our candidates for stepping up and wanting to lead our county. And let's give them a round of applause. I'd also like to ask any other elected official here to please stand up and let us recognize you for all of your community efforts. So, my next step, introduce my friend, Jewell. If you want to know about community service, doing good for the common good, I will talk about Jewell. I've known Sally for 30 years. I've seen firsthand her dedication and commitment to our environment, conservation, to all the issues we care about, to our nation. And while you may know Sally was CEO of REI, and ultimately the Secretary of Interior under President Obama, you should also know there's many other things she did, such as being a regent at the University of Washington, president of Mountains to Sound Greenway, and probably a dozen other things that I don't even know about. On top of that, she's an avid outdoors woman who cares deeply and gets into our environment and enjoys that. And she's also a proud mother, wife, and a good friend that I've known for 30 years. Sally, let's give Sally I need to start and get on with this, but quickly, logistics. Restrooms out the main doors on the left out there. Audience questions will be collected in the back. If you want to write a question, we won't get to all of them, but we'll group them by topic and try to allow at least 30 minutes at the end for questions. Emergency exits here, all around. Run if there's an earthquake. I need to give a public notice that there will be video and photography taken. So if you have problems, go somewhere where you won't be in the picture. And then ground rules. Let's have respect. Let's not have any booing, any catcalling. No side conversations that disrupt the information that's being talked about. We'll have 2 minutes per candidate per question. We have a timer in front, candidates, and when it gets down to 15 seconds, she'll give a wave to make sure you notice that. We will ask that candidates rotate the order in which you answer each question, and we must end by 8:30 so that we can be cleaned up and out of here by 9:30. Feel free to chat afterwards, however. At this point, let me turn it over to Jewell, and let's get on with it.
All right, thank you very much, Ken. Well, I want to first thank Ken and all the organizations that organize this forum, and all of you that do engage in the public process, because it really matters. lives. So thank you, Ken. And he also made a good number of the baked goods that are back there. So if you're waiting and you need a sugar hit, it's over there, and I encourage you to imbibe. I've grown up in King County for the last 65 years. I'm older than that, so I wasn't born here. But I have seen a lot of change. I used to go and get my flute lessons in Redmond when it was all farmland. I used to go to Issaquah Pass skiing when there was snow that was, I don't know, 10, 15 feet high on the sides of the roads. Things are changing here, and I've seen it. Ken mentioned I've been engaged with the Mountain Sound Greenway since its founding in 1991. And there wasn't any better lesson for me in how to be a public servant and how to tackle complicated issues with lots of different points of view than right here in our own backyard, right here near the Issaquah gate, and the entrance starts at the Sound, but when you really feel you're going into the Green Mountains, it's just east of here. We have worked with every county executive since Tim Hill to the present. They've shown up at Greenway meetings, they've been quite engaged and very, very helpful. So it's an important part of what makes this beautiful region so special. And yet we got a lot of growth that I talked about, and there's a lot more growth to come. And how do we do that? It's going to put pressure on the ecosystem, the roads, housing, livability, schools, transportation, all of that stuff. But I know you're all up for it, you've all got the answers. So we're going to begin with some questions that have come largely from the groups that organized this. And so I've modified some of them a little bit to leave them a little more open-ended. But other than that, they're as they were submitted, and each of them has a preamble. And I will call on you, so you don't have to remember who went first last time. I've just sort of rotated it through, and it just happens to be the order you're up, starting with John, is how we'll do this first round. But the first question really is the same for all of you, and that is, you tell us about yourself. Why you want to be county executive, what you see as our biggest challenges, and what your top priorities would be, all within 2 minutes. Please, John, lead us on.
Geez, it's like being back in broadcasting. Holy cow. Why I don't want to be county executive? Because I think this is an amazing region, but we have some very serious challenges ahead of us. Challenges as far as our community safety, but certainly challenges around how we grow, and how we grow with grace, with sustainability in that. I chair for the Assessor's National Association group of large jurisdictions that includes Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and that. And I've seen the havoc that has come to them because of how climate is affecting housing, literally whether it is survivable or not. And we've seen that increasingly we are not able to control nature. Nature controls us. And we've got to be much smarter about how we deal with that, how we build a sustainable future, how we make sure that we include everyone, that we also pursue not only economic justice, but environmental justice, to make sure communities that historically have been disadvantaged have a place at the table, and make sure that they get taken care of. I think the executive is in a unique position to lead this region and lead this county in a direction forward, and that's why I'm running for county executive.
Super. Thank you, John. Claudia.
Good evening, and thanks everyone for organizing this, for being here. It's really lovely to have our first real forum post-filing week be in this space and be about the environment. Last weekend, we opened up the 2 latest transit stations in Redmond, and that is a continuation of a passion project that I have been leading on for well over a decade. But at the opening of that event, a representative of the tribes got up and said something I've heard before, but it really hit me in light of this conversation, and that is, we don't inherit the world from our parents, we borrow it from our children. And that's why we all care so much about the issues we're here to talk about tonight. Because we have got to leave this place better than we found it. And we tend to leave it a little worse than we found it, generation to generation. I served on the Bellevue City Council for 12 years before serving on the King County Council, and where I came into this particular movie, we were having one of the rounds of big battles around the critical areas ordinances. I have been a proud champion in local elected office over 2 decades now of water quality, habitat, land preservation, Very happy to have worked with several familiar faces I see here to preserve the property at Gull Creek that we celebrated just this past summer. That was a big, hard push. Thank you. Local climate action. When I started, the debate we were having was not only was climate change real, but also whether local action mattered. Now local action is what we have, right? Metropolitan areas have got to do the job. And I've been proud to be a part of that. Transportation, clean energy. I've had a key role in all of these and currently chair our regional water quality committee because we have got to finish the job that Forward Thrust started. Very much look forward to the debate tonight.
Great, and Girmay.
Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Great. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Girmay Zahilay. I'm the chair of the King County Council. I'm a new dad. I am a son of unincorporated King County. I grew up in Skyway and in South Seattle, and I'm a candidate for county executive like my friends up here. I'm running for county executive because I believe that this region can be a place of safety and opportunity for everyone with the right leadership, the right public policies. And I believe that because that's what it was for me and my family when we first came over here. When my family and I immigrated to the US as refugees, King County gave us all the tools that we needed to rebuild our lives. We had affordable public housing, good public schools, a social safety net that really allowed us to find a second chance. And because of those opportunities, I was able to go from low income South Seattle housing projects to running for office and becoming the chair of the King County Council. But I'm running for county executive today because I believe that those opportunities are out of reach for too many people, and in fact, I think that they're declining precipitously every single year. The cost of living is astronomical. We have a massive shortage of affordable housing. The climate crisis is no longer an abstract conversation, but one that impacts people every single day. And so I think that we need to have strong leadership that prioritizes partnerships and outcomes so that we can create a region of safety and opportunity for everyone. I believe that during my time on the council, in my second term now, I've championed big regional wins that exemplify the types of things that I'm talking about. You know, building crisis care centers for our neighbors who are going through addiction and mental health issues, increasing the minimum wage for people who are really suffering in this economy, fighting for environmental justice by taking into account airport emissions and airport communities in my district. I want to be King County executive to really make sure that this region works for all of us. Thank you.
Super. Thanks all three of you, and for being very on time. I do want to say one thing that I forgot to say up front, and that is, anybody in the audience that's ever been a public servant, including the three that are up here, could you just raise your hands? Could the rest of us give these guys a round of applause? It's tough duty. It's a tough duty now, but I really came to just so appreciate and value the work of all of our public servants. Okay, candidates do not know any of these questions in advance, so their answers will be authentic and off the cuff. And I don't think any of them are going to knock any of you over backwards. But okay, so the first one, and this one will be in the order of Claudia, Girmay, and John, will be all the partners sponsoring tonight's forum care deeply about our environment. King County has a stellar record of investing in land conservation, parks and public trails, waterways and salmon enhancements, the protection of natural areas vital to sustaining a healthy ecosystem. So what will you do as county executive to conserve, protect, and enhance our natural environment, waterways, farmland, and recreational opportunities, even as our population grows? If you want me to repeat that when we get to you, I will. Let's start off with Claudia.
Thank you. Just repeating the question might take 2 minutes, but I'll answer as much of it as I can. One of the things that I have fought my entire career in public office for is growth management. It was a hard battle. Long before I came along, I want to call out Larry Phillips because I know he remembers the beginning of it, as do many of you here. To draw that urban growth boundary and to say, within this boundary, that's where we put our growth, that's where we put our density, that's where we put our infrastructure. Outside, we protect the environment. And it's not quite as simple as that, but it looks that way from the sky. You can see the urban growth boundary as you fly over King County now. And it takes renewed leadership and renewed commitment in every generation of leaders to protect that, because there's pressure, there's growth pressure. I am an elected official who has worked hard in my own backyard, in the city of Bellevue, where I live and where I have been the mayor and the city council, to do infill development. That's not easy. Your neighbors come out, your constituents come out and say, don't build more here, spread it out, because it's too dense, it's too impactful. But spreading it out means sprawl. Spreading it out means losing open space, means losing more trees. We were talking earlier, if I don't cut down a few trees in Bellevue, I'm gonna cut down a lot of trees outside the urban growth boundary. So I think our commitment to growth management must remain absolutely firm. That means land use, that means investing in transportation, housing where people can afford it, making sure that we are building where we should. You raised a lot of other things. I have been a proud supporter of the Conservation Futures Tax, which has helped us to preserve some amazing spaces outside of the urban growth boundary and even inside the urban growth boundary. We do that every single year. I've been a very proud person fighting for things like the critical areas ordinances. Again, controversial. Anybody remember the farmers' protest? You know, there's people who don't like these things, but we must stand firm for them, and I will as county executive. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Remind, you want a question repeated, or do you have it?
I think I got it. It's a really broad question. I'll start off by saying every single survey that I've ever seen in my life about what people admire and value in the Pacific Northwest, number one on that list is always our natural beauty and our environment. And so I think of these things as our identity, our economy, our public health. We absolutely need to do everything we need to do we can to protect the natural beauty here. And fortunately, we are running for a government where there are a suite of tools that we can use for preservation and for conservation, like you asked about. You know, my colleague mentioned the critical areas ordinances and strengthening those. I think those are up before us right now as mandated by the GMA every 10 years. We have farmland preservation initiatives. We have tools like transfer of development rights to make sure that development is concentrated in the urban areas. We have salmon habitat preservation, or the more cost-efficient version of that, which is removing fish passage barriers. But ultimately, I think it all goes back to the Growth Management Act and being relentless about that urban growth boundary, not letting development pressure nibble away at the edges, and making sure that we continue to concentrate our growth in the urban areas, which has plenty of capacity for our growth, and making sure that we don't destroy things that are irreversible. You know, if we destroy farmland, if we destroy these rich, productive soils in our agricultural areas, there's no bringing them back. That is a one-time destruction, and so we absolutely need to do everything that we can to protect our urban growth area.
Okay, thanks. John?
This is clearly an issue. I think generally we're all in agreement. I would argue I've got a little bit of an edge in that I have to learn every square inch of the county when you're assessor. And one of the things you find out is you learn where is there land that we can develop. And I've been very firm telling developers in the business community, it does not include moving the urban growth boundary. The fact is there's lots of opportunity inside. For example, just south of Bowling Field, in the Boeing area, it is a large plot, probably 25 to 30 acres, that sits there paved. It has a gym that Boeing employees used to use, but they're not very more employees to use it anymore. And so that easily could be turned into housing. We also should look north to our friends in Canada and look how the Canadians have developed, especially the lower mainland, and put density around mass transit. We have failed doing that. We've tried. We've made some steps in the right direction. But I know 10 years ago when Sound Transit approached me about buying my property because it was within 150 feet of where the light rail station was, I said, what are you going to do about housing? They said, we don't do housing. I said, you do ridership, right? Well, yeah. Well, housing kind of goes with ridership. So one of the things I did is in my free time, on my own time, I put together an assemblage of 6 residential parcels and an old auto shop. We sold it to a developer that right now is building 250 units of housing within 150 feet of the Sound Transit station. That should be done in a model for how we do it. The other thing that the executive can do is the executive, whether it's she or he, has the ability to frankly jawbone these localities to meeting their targets and not dodging them. You don't get to build parks next to the light rail station. You get to build housing.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question, and the last question was a preview to this one, so you can expand a little bit. It talks about the Growth Management Act implemented in 1990, which has been crucial in limiting urban sprawl by accommodating growth within defined boundaries in order to protect the kind of the lands we've talked about. Yet there are recurring efforts to alter or dismantle the GMA and enable growth to expand onto undeveloped rural lands. So the question, with our population projected to grow by 1 million in the next 20 years, what strategies would you use to ensure adequate and affordable housing for this growing population, given our historical commitment to growth management and preventing sprawl? Right.
I'll start off by saying that population growth is not an excuse to violate our rural and agricultural areas. If you were to take the city of Paris and try to fit it in Seattle, you could fit 2.5 Parises in Seattle. But they have a population of 2 million, and Seattle has a population of, 800,000. So clearly, the urban areas have plenty of capacity to continue building more housing to meet the growth of our population projections. I'll start off with that as a value statement. And so in terms of how do we respect the integrity of the Growth Management Act, there are many things that we can do. First and foremost, I'll begin with just something that my wife tells me when we're arguing, which is assume good intent. So you assume good intent of developers and you say, maybe our code needs to be more transparent, maybe our code needs to be more clear, maybe we need to adopt a plain language policy. And then also maybe we need to be far more responsive in our permitting divisions when people have questions. Maybe we don't have to take as long as we do in our permitting processes so that people don't feel like they have to go out there and do things on their own. And if good intent doesn't work, then we can go out to incentives. You know, we can incentivize people to maintain the fidelity of our rural and urban areas. I talked about transfer of development rights earlier. We can use that. We can use conservation easements. There's a lot we can do with our legal tools without being too harsh on people to make sure that we continue to respect our rural and agricultural lands. Finally, if those things don't work, we do have to have penalties. And those penalties have to actually disincentivize bad behavior. So I do support increasing penalties, and for truly egregious actors, we should have a conversation about criminal penalties as well.
Okay, John.
So what strategies to deal with population growth? I think obviously first and foremost is that we place an emphasis on smart density. And we have not again done that. You see a number of opportunities, whereas we have built out sound transit, and heaven knows we need mass transit, having worked in Washington, D.C. and seen the benefits of it. But, too often what we've done is we haven't gone big enough. And part of how you deal with density is truly build communities. One of the great ideas that former Executive Constantine had was, frankly, let's take the county campus down around the courthouse and let's turn it into a vibrant 24/7 community that has density to it, has vitality to it, and has things that make it a vibrant part of that end of downtown. We can do that with the right leadership, and I'll provide that kind of leadership to make that happen. The other thing clearly that we've got to do in order to protect for population growth is streamline our permitting process. And we can do that without gutting our permitting process. When you actually look at what's required in permits, in most cases, much of it can be harmonized. And frankly, with the smart use of artificial intelligence these days, we could easily streamline that. And I know people that I've been talking to already that are working on that. I would work to partner with them so that we have model permitting that led the nation.
Thank you. The short answer to how we accommodate population growth is we just need more housing. We need more housing, we need more types of housing, we need a lot more housing. And so, when I took this job, not content with the answer that you do hear in a lot of regional spaces, we don't do housing. I made sure we did housing everywhere I've been. I led a task force that came up with, that brought all the cities in the county together. We came up with a series of recommendations, one of which was that we should work together to create more affordable housing and more types of affordable housing. We created a workforce within King County that now is dedicated to this, inspired some regulatory encouragement, as I like to call it, from the state. And then we planned. We all planned and committed, every jurisdiction committed to allow in their comprehensive plans affordable housing at every level of affordability, from people who are homeless and have no income and no place to live, all the way up to market rate housing. And we agreed to hold each other accountable to make sure that we are starting to meet those targets. And so we will look back and see how we are doing, putting housing in areas within the urban growth boundary around light rail. And then that's the big picture. We have the big numbers. How do we start to fill in that picture? I've been part of proposing and building the largest TOD in this part of the country, and that's around the Spring District in Bellevue, because we knew that's where we could put a lot of density, right where it's shown to connect people to opportunity. And that's been growing. Shoreline has been working on density around light rail. Redmond's got 2 light rail stations where they're working on TOD and density. This is the way. We know how to do it, and we know how to build it. I've already been a leader in these spaces. We have created, at Sound Transit, who used to not do housing, true, we created thousands of units of housing around light rail because of leadership on the board when I served again with Board Member Phillips and others. So we know what to do. We need to do more of it. At County Executive, I will continue working those partnerships and those programs.
Great. Okay. Next question. King County's comprehensive plan policies protect rural lands by limiting uses to residential and small rural-focused businesses, such as those serving rural needs or based on products grown on sites, such as U-Pick farms. However, many commercial interests continue to try to locate urban-serving businesses and event facilities, such as corporate event centers and alcohol retail outlets, concert venues, and so on lands designated as rural. So how would you propose to address this issue? We'll start with John.
I think you learned the word no. You know, there's some of these things where we have to say, that's a nice idea, but it's counter to the intent and counter to the overall greater interest of the community in that. We've seen controversy up and down the Puget Sound corridor over creepy commercial development in residential or in rather rural areas. You know, but at the same time, we very much treasure the idea of farm-to-table agriculture, don't we? Well, you've got to have land to actually grow that crop to bring to that restaurant. And that. I have 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. My girls both work in restaurants. They love farm-to-table, but they go, Dad, it's hard to find produce and things like that. It's actually made here in King County. You know, we need to honor that if we're going to have a full, robust, sustainable county, we've got to have both the rural environment sound and protected, while we also create density in the urban environment.
Thank you. I believe this question is directed at me, so I'm going to take it straight on. There are indeed a lot of pressures to allow more types of uses and more buildings outside the urban growth boundary. And when I arrived as a King County Councilmember, one of the big ones we were having was in the Sammamish Valley around a series of small tasting rooms, wine shops, etc., whatever you want to call them, that had been there, most of which were not permitted, many of which were unpermittable, and we took up a plan to try to update the code to see if we could solve this problem that existed in the real world. It did seem that there was a compromise. People seemed open to the idea of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and compromise to allow some of these businesses to stay. The activity ultimately failed. We ended up being told by the Supreme Court that we didn't do the process right and we needed to go backwards. I will tell you one thing about me as a leader. I was told I was wrong. I'm not Donald Trump. I sponsored the legislation that repealed my legislation because I was told to do so. And we will pass it and we will go back. But I can't tell you how many times people have come into my office and rolled out some big, beautiful plotter paper thing that they've drawn and said something like, if I could just have a sewer extension just slightly across the boundary, I could build this thing and make a lot of money. And I say, but you can't have the sewer extension. If I could just have more than 5 homes per acre, maybe just 10 homes or per 5 acres, whatever. And I say, but you can't have that. That's outside the urban growth boundary. We have said no. We've said no to fire departments. We've said no to schools. When you say no to those kinds of folks who have a really compelling argument as to why they need to expand and why they would like to be on cheaper land, it's easy to say no to concert promoters who want to build new venues and other types of uses, and that's what I will continue to do. I have fought off changes around the urban growth boundary, and I will continue to do so.
Oh, I'm glad y'all made me last. I took a lot of notes. So I have a vision for our farmlands to be productive agriculturally, low density, beautiful, and at the same time, I also absolutely want our farmers to be able to make money off of their products and generate interest amongst the general public. So small scale events tied to production on site is something that I would be supportive of, but small scale is emphasis on that word, and also we can't allow that allowance to be a loophole for bigger commercial operations to come in. So if we're talking about small scale, we're talking about products that are being sold that were grown by that farmer on site rather than imported, and maybe we can even make it seasonal so that it's not an ongoing operation that requires some of the things that my colleague was talking about, like sewer connections and other developments that really become a violation of our Growth Management Act. Those are things that I could see myself supporting, but at the end of the day, we absolutely need to support our Growth Management Act. I think that the courts have been very clear that the 2019 ordinance was a violation of the GMA, and I will be also co-sponsoring the revised legislation.
Okay, next question, and Claudia, this one will go to you first. We understand that King County faces serious budget challenges, including a projected $150 million shortfall for the next biennium that may require painful cuts to existing programs and services. What's the scope of this challenge, and how would you address it?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. We've actually been hearing a projection of about $160 million shortfall. That's in our general fund. And those of you who haven't had the joy of working on government budgets, we do fund accounting, which means there's a variety of different funds. The general fund is the most flexible fund. It covers anything that tax money can be used for. And in our case, it's funded mostly with sales tax and property tax. And it covers mostly public safety functions. Our police, courts, jails, prosecutors, and public defenders are over 70% of that fund. And we're looking to lose a significant chunk of it if that cut cannot be filled. Our property taxes, as our assessor will tell you, are limited in how much we can increase. They don't increase at the rate of inflation, and our costs go up at the rate of inflation, so we end up with a structural deficit. The legislature, in their wisdom, gave us this year a new sales tax authority. So we are going to have a discussion this year, and by the way, this is like open mic time, about whether we should increase sales tax in order to fill that hole. It would more than cover the needs that we have and would enable us potentially to fund some smarter upstream prevention type work that will ultimately help us to not, if we need so much criminal justice work. But it's a tax increase. And it's the most regressive type of tax increase because that is the only option we have been given. So that's what we're looking at. And now there are other funds that are also at risk. And I say, this race has changed dramatically since January when the federal government decided to go to war with government and pull back all our funding. We may find ourselves looking at a shortfall in public health, in emergency management, in a number of places in housing. We may see people lose their HUD vouchers and be on the streets. We are going to have a big conversation about what we can afford to cover and how we stand up to the federal government, and I'm going to hand it off to my colleague to take it further.
There you go. On you.
Yeah, I mean, Claudia covered a lot of it, but that general fund shortfall is really, really problematic, specifically because how we fund our core services is out of the general fund. When I go around my communities and I ask them what are the things you care about most, public safety, public health are the two top things that they talk about. And that's how we fund those things, is out of the general fund. And so a lot of people will say, $160 million shortfall, your budget is $10 billion a year. That seems like a drop in the hat, that's nothing. But when you look at the general fund specifically, that is a huge proportion of the general fund. So there isn't really a lot of cost cutting that's gonna save us out of that general fund. Before Dow left his position as executive, the proposal was
Well, climate change impacts are being dismissed at the federal level. To its credit, King County has a documented climate action plan. However, King County and area cities are far off the needed trajectory to meet their own climate goals for reducing emissions. So the question, and this will start with Girmay, is what should the county do, and what would you do as executive to get our region on track to meet emissions reductions goals?
Yeah, this is a very relevant conversation because we are going to be updating our strategic climate action plan this coming year. I just got a briefing on it and it's looking like a great framework, and the next executive is going to have to implement it aggressively. Number one, we have to reduce our carbon emissions. You know, that's the most obvious one. It's easier said than done, and we have a lot of strategies to do that. We need to expand public transit. You know, number one emitters of carbon in our region are cars, and so the more we can have fast, reliable, accessible public transportation, the more we can get people out of cars, the less we can destroy our climate. And so we need to expand public transit. I absolutely believe we need to aggressively electrify our fleet. We need to lean into clean energy options and harness clean energy. I think we should identify which King County properties can be used to build up clean energy facilities. We should be partnering with other jurisdictions that have greater supply of clean energy like solar and wind, and bringing that to our region. I think that'll take collaboration with our state government. There are huge issues with things like the Cascades being a barrier to transferring clean energy over the mountains over to us, but I think we've got to use that bully pulpit to push our state to bring that clean energy here. We need adaptation. You know, I've been a big advocate of extreme weather mitigation strategies like heating and cooling centers, places where people can escape smoke. We need to partner up with our frontline communities. I come from communities that are near airports and near highways that are breathing in toxins with disproportionate rates of asthma. We need to be co-designing our strategies with them. We need to go back to what we were talking about, preventing sprawl. We know the more we concentrate density in urban areas and prevent sprawl, the better that is for our environment. And finally, we need a Green New Deal for a green workforce, really train people up in this new era of new clean energy jobs.
Okay, thanks. John?
Yeah, clearly, I think we're all in agreement that we have to reduce our emissions, and I think though we have to be realistic about it. And the notion of electrifying our entire fleet is questionable when you really understand the infrastructure problems that we have. The fact is we don't have enough transmission capacity to move electricity out of eastern Washington into Puget Sound. Now, we could certainly start to build small, decentralized energy in that, but there are a number of things we should also look at. We should not just look at where we can electrify our fleet. We have to look at how we decarbonize both transportation and housing. For example, one of the things that one of my assessor friends in Chicago is looking at is particularly one of the areas that gets hit hardest by the cost of carbon are low-income housing projects. Why not figure out how we provide property tax abatement to encourage them to take steps to decarbonize, and rather than using oil or natural gas or even old baseboard heat, become more energy efficient. In Illinois, they're actually looking at providing a means by which you could use geothermal to do that. That could benefit us. We need to look at, when we talk about decarbonizing, how we move more aggressively toward varieties of non-carbon or low-carbon fuels, such as hydrogen. And actually, you're already seeing leading national or international automakers, both BMW and Toyota, are looking at moving away from electrified. Can you imagine a Prius that's not electrified? My God. But what if you had a Prius that was hydrogen powered? And that. You're seeing that happen more and more. There are other things that we can do by increasing our energy efficiency standards and that, by working with builders and that, to build truly tight but healthy energy efficient homes. Those are some of the things we can do that will help bring our emissions down and create a sustainable community.
Okay, thank you, John. All three of you. Oh, Claudia.
Thank you. Yeah. I can skip it if you.
No, I don't think we want to skip it.
So, one of the things that I have been pushing very hard in all the places I have before is accountability around climate. We've gotten past, as I said at the beginning, the time when people said local action doesn't matter. We now understand that. I'm really proud to have been the mayor who signed on Bellevue onto the K4C, the King County Climate Collaboration, and to have started our first climate action plan in that city, because prior to my time, that was not seen as an issue, not something we needed to do something about, not something that that was our problem. And now we all know it's all of our problems. And as the federal government backs away, in fact leans into, drill baby drill sort of thinking, they're going to be pushing on the other side of the scales. So we need to know what efforts we're doing are working. We shy from this. As past president of the Puget Sound Regional Council, we were updating our regional transportation plan, and that consists of policies and a list of projects. The policies say all the right things. We're going to reduce emissions. We're going to be resilient. We're going to do all the right things. The list of projects says we're going to expand the freeways. And so it just doesn't work. So I pushed to make sure that part of our work was to show, does that plan meet our climate goals? Spoiler alert, it does not. So now we have to get real with ourselves. And we really do need to transition our fleet, our county fleet, yes, but the fleet out in the world, all of our cars and trucks, to electrification. We need to build the transmission and the electrical infrastructure it needs to do that. I'm the candidate here who has actually fought battles over building new transmission lines. People don't love them. We need them. We need battery electric storage. We need to transition the grid. And then we also need to work on green buildings, just transition, so that people who work, plumbers and pipe fitters, who have endorsed my campaign, want to have jobs. We need to help them get those jobs. And we need accountability. That's the bottom line. Thank you.
Okay, next question, and we'll start with John on this one. A little bit of a opposite of the one we just talked about, or in conflict perhaps. Some outlying cities, such as Black Diamond, have approved massive master plan developments with limited traffic mitigation improvements, which are creating new large traffic congestion problems on county and state roads that current funding mechanisms cannot adequately address. How would you improve coordinated regional traffic planning and mitigation to address the problem of outlying cities creating substantial new growth that overwhelms county and state roads?
There's clearly no easy solution to that. Part of that is decisions that were made in the Growth Management Act to allow communities like Black Diamond and that to grow. What we've also got to do, though, is try to encourage that they develop the comprehensive infrastructure, not just transportation, but employment infrastructure, so that jobs are closer to home, that people aren't having to get in a car or wait for a bus for 45 minutes to get to that job. If we start to develop both economic centers along with housing, the closer we can link those, the better we'll all be. We need to realize that we are going to have some of these pockets, and it'll take some time, but there are other things that we can look at. Some of it is changing work habits. We see that already, frankly, the number of people that work from home, and that. So if we can stage that, if we can work with employers also perhaps to figure out how you stage office hours if they have them, so that you're not rushing everybody on the roadways and clogging them up all at the same time. That could have a benefit. But overall, it's trying to work in concert with everybody and figure out what's going to work here, what's going to work in the 21st century, and realize that we're all in this together.
Claudia.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've had a number of difficult discussions over the years about these big suburban islands, if you will, way outside. They're in their own urban growth boundaries. Usually they've got a circle around them, but they're well outside where all the infrastructure is. I have been somebody who has supported at the regional level through my work, again, at PSRC, that we really discourage and not outright stop these kinds of developments because they do overwhelm our transportation system. And if you start to expand the transportation system and the sewers and all the infrastructure, you're just creating a center of gravity that calls for more growth out there. And so I think we have to kind of say we're not going to be able to provide traffic-free experience for people who live in these kinds of suburban islands. We're just going to have to, they're going to have to make do with what they have. And this idea about housing and jobs going together, it's something that people have talked about for a long time. It just doesn't happen in the real world. If you look at a place like Snoqualmie or even Bellevue or Redmond, in the morning, you know, back before COVID, when people weren't mostly working, you know, so many of them were working from home, about 70, 80, 90% of the people get up in the morning and drive somewhere else for work. And the people who work there drive from somewhere else to be there, and at night they swap. So it just developed, when people don't work that way. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we have got urban centers, focus on urban centers, and the transportation system, the light rail system, the bus rapid transit that connects those to each other. I will say we have a rural roads problem. We have to be very honest with ourselves about that. The funding mechanism doesn't work because there's not enough people in the unincorporated area to pay for all those rural roads. We need to start to think about how we, together, those of us who live near them and not near them, help to upgrade those roads for safety and for, you know, the purposes that they're for. We have bridges that are going to fall down. We can't allow that to happen. We have to invest at that level at least.
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How would you improve coordinated regional traffic planning and mitigation to address the problem of outlying cities creating substantial new growth that overwhelms county and state roads?
Thank you for that question. First and foremost, we absolutely cannot have a region where all of these cities and neighborhoods are planning large developments on their own in a disconnected way, because they often don't take into account how that impacts the surrounding region. You can't just develop a big complex somewhere out in the remote areas and not expect, you know, infrastructure issues, traffic issues, so much else. And so I would support, through the Growth Management Planning Council, GMPC, a much stronger version of that so that we can actually plan our growth together. One thing that I think would be helpful personally, when I first got on the council years ago, I joined GMPC and I felt like the training around it, the importance of it, the buy-in wasn't really shared with me as clearly as it should be. And so having a renewed sense of training 101 for new elected officials to really understand the value of the Growth Management Act, what it does for our environment and our economy, and really getting buy-in from new elected officials around the region, I think could do a lot. And the relationship building that you could get from GMPC. I happened to join during the pandemic, and so people were all remote and virtual. So really making sure that our systems are only as strong as the relationships of the people within them. And so making sure that we have more in-person meetings for GMPC, making sure that we're developing those relationships so that we can actually coordinate and plan together through trust building, I think is really important. And also we absolutely have to make sure that developers take into account the impact that they're having beyond just the structure that they're building, the impact on traffic, the impact on the environment, and that should be assessed in whatever economic requirements are there for them. We absolutely need to expand transit in the urban areas. Okay, that's it.
All right, there'll be a lot more opportunities and variations on a theme. Okay, Claudia, we'll start with you on this next question. King County has good policies and codes designed to protect rural, agricultural, forest lands, natural areas, waterways, critical areas, and our small rural communities. However, these policies and codes are too often not upheld and enforced. A 2024 audit of code enforcement showed a record of backlogged cases with little effective enforcement. This situation enables intentional abuse of zoning laws, particularly by commercial users, and evasion of accountability for violating city codes. How will you address this problem to ensure that permit conditions are adhered to, that illegal commercial uses of rural land stop, and that violators are subject to code enforcement and penalties?
Thank you. I'm a person who has advocated for more resources in code enforcement, more code enforcers. I was able to convince my colleagues to add some, but not everything that we asked for, in order to make sure that we have the manpower, the person power, in order to respond to these things, because having backed up complaints is an invitation to people to not worry about complaints and do whatever they want. So I think we need to have that. We need more education. It was very helpful when we did bring on people who were able to go out to areas of particular types of concerns that were happening in multiple places and educate businesses. They do better when they know that people are looking and when they are educated. But definitely we need more resources there, and we have been unwilling to put them there because we're not willing to be unpopular. Code enforcement isn't popular, but it's okay. It's okay to enforce the rules. I do want to just go back to the last question for a quick second and just say, because I'm afraid that maybe a wrong impression might have been left here. I'm a longtime member of the GMPC, and I formed a subcommittee of it for the Affordable Housing Committee, and we have members, and I think we work very well together, and we also have done some pretty tough things together. So we get it done in the GMPC. And we have said no to several attempts to move or do things outside the urban growth boundary together, even recently, and it continues. I will also say our codes could be clearer, so if the rules are clearer, you get fewer violations. And I want to go back to an idea I think that we also all agree with. I will make it a top priority in my administration to get our permitting processes right. We should allow uses that are allowed, we should allow them quickly and easily. We should not allow uses that are not allowed, and we should enforce the rules. And I think we need to do a better job on all three of those. Thank you.
Okay, Girmay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I answered a lot of this when we were talking about the Growth Management Act previously and how we make sure that we respect our urban growth boundaries. But absolutely, we need to clarify the code and make sure that it's easier to follow the law first and foremost. We need to staff up our code enforcement and make sure that there are enough people to actively go out there and find violations, because there are violations happening even if they're not being sued. And then we also have to make sure that we have the right penalties for the right violations. Some of those penalties could be fines, but you know, this is the laws of economics say that you can't just fine somebody the exact amount of damage that they did. You have to fine them much greater than that to disincentivize them from doing it in the first place. And so increasing fines is important. And then for truly, truly bad actors, like I mentioned before, the people who are absolutely destroying our environment recklessly, there should be some criminal penalties as well. I think that it's going to take a combination of things, but at the end of the day, we can't just have rules on the books that are not enforced. We need to have enforcement mechanisms in order to actively go out there, find violators, and hold them accountable.
Okay, and John.
I think we're in general agreement that we need to make sure we tighten up things on code enforcement, but we've seen some glaring examples where it's, for example, a few years ago in West Seattle, a group of residents decided that the trees were obstructing their view of the Seattle skyline. So in the dead of night, they hired someone to go in and chop all the trees down. Lo and behold, that was clearly a violation of the code, violation of the law, and that. So what we did is we came back and said, you know what? It turns out you now have a view, and we're going to raise your values and give you for bad taxes. We've seen other cases where I've seen people, because we don't tightly integrate permitting with the physical inspection work that the assessor's office is required to do by law, slip away. I had a couple where one was a builder, he was a builder, she was a realtor. They figured out how to build their home in between physical inspection phases and then sold it before we put the new value on it. We went back and got them. I had a guy that was a hedge fund millionaire on Capitol Hill who went in and remodeled the old Sand Hill mansion, listed it on Redfin for $15 million now. That's one of my guilty pleasures is Redfin. Well, he said proudly, I don't pay property taxes on it. Guess what? I hit him with a lien for $57,000 and blocked his sale until he paid that and paid the back taxes he owes. That's the kind of enforcement that I will bring as your county executive.
Okay, next question, and we'll start with Greenway on this one. King County is the largest sewage discharger in Puget Sound. Currently, its treatment plant technology is far behind other dischargers to this important water body, and the county will be the last in the entire state to eliminate combined sewer overflows, even though they're under a federal consent decree to do so. What is your vision on how he would work to modernize King County's approach to sewage treatment to address these issues, while also planning for future growth.
I had an opportunity to visit our wastewater treatment plant, West Point, which is one of our biggest ones up in the Magnolia neighborhood, I believe it is. And it was a great experience. We have a lot of hardworking King County officials out there making sure that our waste is transformed and safe to go back into the environment as liquids, gases, and solids. So just shout out to them. I think first and foremost, we need to upgrade our technology. You know, the problem that you're describing is that stormwater is combining with wastewater and overflowing and spilling out into Puget Sound. The first thing that we can do is make sure that our stormwater is handled better. You know, there are certain technologies you can employ to make sure that we handle it before it even combines with wastewater. You know, certain rain gardens that absorb water, better drainage systems. But there are also, once the combination does happen, we are working on two really great wet weather facilities in Georgetown and in the Duwamish that are really essential to making sure that we abide by the consent decree that we're in from the EPA. And I think completing that construction is going to be really critical. Next, I think we need to work on public education. I think the general public doesn't really know how much they contribute to toxins going into through the wastewater, going into combining through the stormwater, combining with the wastewater. Things like the runoff from your tires, oil leaks, things like that. So doing a strong public education campaign to just make sure that the general public knows that with a little bit of tightening, we can really protect our environment. And lastly, I'll say that the combination of our aging infrastructure and abiding by certain regulations is really killing ratepayers. So doing something about the astronomical costs that our ratepayers are going to be paying is really critical too.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly what we all recognize, whether we want to like it or not, is that the county has a risk of being one of the region's leading polluters if we don't handle our wastewater with great care and that. And we've unfortunately already seen situations where our sewer treatment plants have faltered in that. We've got to make sure that we make the investment in that. And that's why, you know, we really need to take a budgetary approach on what our priorities of government have to be. And the fact is that a major wastewater accident could have disastrous impacts on public health, on our economy, and on our sustainability. So we have to get ahead of that. That includes, where practical, that we make additional investments to update facilities, keep them, as Girmay suggested, also look at emerging technologies and things that we can do that will help improve that. You know, it is one of those operations the county has that's not sexy. It's second only to assessments as far as not being sexy. But the fact is, it's absolutely vital to the well-being of our community, and it's something we have to get right.
Claudia?
Thank you. You know, at King County, we have a regional water quality committee where we partner with our cities and with the utility districts to work on this very issue. And it has for many years been our most unpopular committee. Typically, when you're the chair, when I was the chair for 3 years, I had to twist somebody's arm every single year to get them to chair that committee. And I had the mayor of Kirkland come up to me, and you're going to have to excuse me, I'm going to use profanity. She said, Claudia, do you know how much money needs to be invested into the wastewater treatment system to bring it up to snuff over the years? She said, it's enormous. The rates are going to break people's backs. The water quality is not where it should be, and the county council should give a shit, and you don't. So I took that home and lived with it for a while, and agreed to volunteer to step into the lead on this role. And what I have learned in the last 3 years working on this issue, it is probably the largest capital challenge facing us right now. We're talking about millions of gallons per day, every day. The CSOs don't all belong, combined sewer overflows, they don't all belong to King County. Most of them belong to Seattle. It's a place where the old system that was built when Seattle was the region, and the new system that's been built as the region expanded into other cities and unincorporated areas come together. And we are working together on multi-billion-dollar investments to make them work better. But they're only going to work so well. There's no magic technology fix. There's no technology that's come along that's going to make this clean, cheap, and easy. There's no education fix. Rain gardens are great. Rain gardens are not going to fix this problem. We need an all of government and all of the country effort, because this is a problem everywhere. And just to end with my last 10 seconds on, it's 1/10 of our water quality problem, because a much larger problem is the stormwater runoff, far worse than sewers. It's an area the next executive is going to have to tackle with seriousness and intent, and there are no easy answers.
Okay, next question, and for this one we'll start with John. In a time of increased disruption to our food supply chain from climate change, bird flu, tariffs, and other factors, there's increasing interest in local food security. Yet King County has lost over 100,000 acres of some of the most productive soils in the state. What do you see as the greatest challenge to preserving farmland in King County, and what steps would you take to encourage local farming?
Well, first and foremost, we have to stop encroaching on it. If we keep allowing sprawl to happen, or other uses such as event centers or that, we run into the problem that farmland becomes the first thing to go. It's one of the challenges that, frankly, real estate dynamics create. Is they put greater and greater economic pressure on people to flip that farm into something else. And that we've got to also figure out how we work with our farm community to deal with regulations and that sometimes may be well intended, but have adverse effects on how they need to operate. And maybe we work with them on figuring out how to do a better job of that. We have, certainly with WSU and its extension services, great resources available to us to help tackle some of that kind of thing. And we have to realize that if we're going to place value on having a robust agricultural sector in the county, we're going to have to treat them as a legitimate player at the table and not as an afterthought. And too often, I'm afraid, we've treated them as an afterthought.
Okay, Claudia.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, come from Bellevue, served on the Bellevue City Council. There are 2 farms in Bellevue. One of them is a privately owned farm, and I don't know too much about it other than they want to convert it into a dog kennel, and they can't under their zoning. And the other farm is a demonstration farm. So when I took this job, Kelsey Creek, which is lovely, bring the kids, really, really nice place. But so when I took the job as King County council member some years ago now, and was representing a large portion of the Sammamish Valley, that's when I really got to start learning about farming, because there are farmers there. And they are struggling with challenges that farmers are, a lot of places, encroaching development. Land costs are so high that it's very hard for them, even if development doesn't encroach, to be able to continue to afford farming because their costs are going up all the time. It's a hard living. There's not a lot of people who want to do farming. It's hard work. And so there's labor issues with people who are able to do jobs. It doesn't pay as well as being a software programmer, and it's harder physical work. The county, it has, since Executive Constantine has been our executive, has undertaken a number of initiatives to try to help and uplift farming in the county. Programs like there's a farm to table program, a farm to fish flood program. I would absolutely support continuing those programs and expanding. I've been very intrigued by the idea, and I'm going to get the terminology wrong, of sort of circular farming, where everything that's done is sustainable on the farm itself. There's not a lot of removing of nutrients or resources from the land. By the way, and this is because we don't live in a tyranny, you don't have to tell people what to do with their property, but there's a very large sod farm that takes up much of the Sammamish Valley, and that's not really farming, that's like mining. They're just stripping the soil off. So I, as executive, would want to continue to support the farmers, work with them for what they need. Thank you.
Thanks. Good one.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. What do you see as the greatest challenge to preserving farmland in King County, and what steps would you take to encourage local farming?
Thank you. Yeah, the greatest challenges, I think John touched on it, are the development pressure. There is so much pressure to continue violating the Growth Management Act, violating that urban growth boundary, developing in places that we shouldn't be developing. I think our friends from Sammamish Valley call it death by 1,000 cuts, where it's just little encroachments which over time end up being a huge problem. I mentioned earlier that our farmlands, especially in the Snoqualmie Valley, have such rich soils that we have to do everything that we can to protect them. Once you destroy them, they're not coming back. And so the first thing I would do is continue being very aggressive about protecting that urban growth boundary and not allowing violations. We talked a lot before about increasing our code enforcement and utilizing incentives. We also need to be buying up land. We have a land conservation initiative. We need to buy that land. We need to use conservation easements. We should do everything that we can to keep that farmland. Next, we need to help create markets for our farmers. You know, I think allowing small agro-tourism for production that's on site to help them make money so that they can sustain and continue existing is important. We can help connect them to schools and restaurants and really strengthen that pipeline and that partnership of farm to table, like Claudia mentioned. So those are all things that I would do as King County Executive to make sure that we preserve our farmland, we support our farmers, we help them make money, and we build the relationship so that the whole region can really understand and support the incredible service that we are getting from our rural and agricultural areas.
Okay, next question, and we'll start with Claudia on this one. The comprehensive plan indicates that by 2029, there will be too little revenue to maintain existing roads in the county's rural areas, much less provide for new capacity for regional growth. The county road tax is paid only by residents of the rural areas, while 3/4 of the use of major rural roads, such as Issaquah-Hobart Road, is by residents of outlying cities who pay nothing to use the county's roads. What would you do as county executive to rectify this long-standing problem before it reaches a tipping point where roads and bridges must be closed due to an inability to maintain them?
We covered this a little bit before, but just to sort of dive into some more. Again, this is a systemic problem because the funding mechanisms for rural roads are flatly insufficient to maintain them. And that is statewide. Our state tax system is not set up to handle this problem. There are counties in further flung parts of the state that have actually started grinding their rural roads into gravel because they can't afford to keep them paved. And we don't want that to be our situation. I have pitched in the past to business groups within the urban areas that we need to think about being willing to use some of our tax dollars that we raise here for all those folks that you said use the roads but don't live in the unincorporated areas to help subsidize, to pay our share of helping to maintain those roads. We have a taxing district that we have never utilized, transportation benefit district. We're going to have this discussion on, I believe we decided on June 2nd, so tune in. We're going to have this very conversation about what we do, whether we raise new revenue, and if so, for what. It can be used for transit, it can be used for roads, this funding source. I think we need to do both. I think we need to continue to invest in our climate-friendly transit system, and we need to figure out how to preserve our roads and bridges. Again, my priorities for funding would be first, safety. First, we maintain the bridges so they don't fall down. First, we maintain the roads so they don't wash out. Second, connectivity, so that we don't lose, because we have had parts of the county that have been cut off for long periods of time. When the roads wash out and people can't get from here to there, they're literally stranded. We have to not allow that to happen. But what I would not be as favorable to is expanding rural roads. Again, that becomes a center of gravity where we start attracting more activities that belong in the urban areas. And I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Girmay.
Thank you. Yeah, just to underscore this systemic problem that we are having, we are limited by the state government to allow our growth of our revenues to be limited to 1% every single year. The growth of our revenues is at 1%, but the cost of constructing and maintaining roads is getting higher and higher every single year. So that's that structural gap that everyone talks about. At the same time, we have that 1% cap. We also have a shrinking tax base because, as we all know, the inequity of our region is that rural roads that are used by everyone are paid for only by people who live in unincorporated King County. And as more unincorporated areas are annexed by cities, that tax base is shrinking and shrinking. So over time, we're actually going to have less and less revenue when the problem is getting bigger and bigger. And so there is no sustainable answer other than the state and federal government to come in and fix this big infrastructure issue that we have. We absolutely need to aggressively lobby the state government. That's what I will do to make sure that we have more taxing options, more stable revenue to fix these roads. We have some local tools. Claudia mentioned the Transit Benefit District. We should absolutely have that conversation. We've also had conversations around a road levy that we started talking about in 2020, but I think we've quickly abandoned that because of the pandemic and other more urgent priorities at the time. But other options that we should talk about are, impact and usage fees to make sure that cost burden is shared beyond just the people who live in unincorporated King County, who, by the way, I represent Skyway, and their property taxes tend to be higher than what everybody else pays because of issues like this. And so it is a huge inequity. And so if there are different fees that we can apply to the general public for using these roads but not having to pay to maintain them, we should absolutely have those conversations and pursue that.
Okay, John.
Wow. I gotta say, if we think that the state or federal government is gonna come to rescue us, we're kidding ourselves. Especially this federal government. Let's get a grip. I mean, it's more likely that they're gonna say, well, we want even more of your money. I think what we're gonna have to do is figure out how we get this done ourselves. And it can be done. One of the things we've seen with property taxes post-pandemic is there has been a shift from the commercial sector to the residential sector. 2 years ago, residential taxpayers paid 83% of the $7.2 billion in property taxes. This year, they're paying 72%. We are sitting in a community right now, and in a region that has some of the world's most successful corporations. We should be demanding, we should be asking, we should hold them accountable to pay your fair share. And by paying your fair share, help cover the cost of rural King County that your employees so often hop in their European car and race out to enjoy. Well, fine, that's good. I've done some of that myself. But the fact is, we don't have a fair and equitable tax system. And that's why I've gone to Olympia repeatedly and pled with the legislature, finally modernize our tax system, provide property tax relief to working families and to renters, and make corporations pay their fair share.
Okay, thank you, John. Girmay, this one's going to go to you first. Homelessness and a lack of affordable housing options are serious problems in King County. Even though data shows there's ample room for increased housing with existing urban growth boundaries as well as unincorporated urban areas, our region has an affordable housing crisis. What do you think is driving this issue, and what actions would you take to solve it?
Thank you. First of all, if you're going to have one takeaway from this meeting, remember that John Arthur Wilson said, "Tax the rich," and let's see if he says that in the Seattle Times editorial interview.
I will.
Okay. Absolutely, we have a housing crisis in our region. Number one, we need to increase the supply of housing. I think we can do that in many ways. We can do that by investing more public dollars into affordable housing to subsidize the cost of its construction. We do that through levies and other types of taxes, and I support continuing those options and getting more grants from the state government and maybe a different federal government, John, maybe not this one. And then we also need to get creative about how we fund housing. I've proposed more debt financing so that we can borrow money and invest in more housing for our essential workers. We also need to make it easier to build in our urban areas, you know, streamlining permitting requirements, cutting red tape, making it much easier to build infill housing in the urban areas. We also need to reduce displacement. You know, people currently have housing, we need to make it easier for them to stay in their housing. I was proud to sponsor and champion the tenant protection and eviction prevention legislation, and also anti-displacement strategies in areas like Skyway. And so keeping people housed where they are, also through home ownership opportunities, those are all things that keep communities intact and not displace them. We also need to continue to have strong regional coordination through our comprehensive planning processes. We have to have every corner of our region building the housing that they are required to build based on what their setup is. Obviously, we don't want to build lots of housing in our rural and agricultural areas, but there are other cities that are not Seattle that should be taking on their fair share of preparing for that growth and building that housing. So increasing supply, reducing displacement, and also having stronger regional coordination are all things that I would do.
Okay, John.
So clearly, we have a multiple housing crisis. Affordability is one that I think so many King County residents feel, but we also clearly have a homelessness crisis. In 2018, we identified more than 24 properties that were publicly owned and available for development and to date. You want to know how many of those have actually been developed? None. Not a one. Not a one. Could be. But one of the things you find from the remnants of Sound Transit is the route is checkerboarded with small pieces of property. We could use that for housing. Second idea, out on Aurora in Seattle, there's a Sam's Club. It's 144,000 square feet. It's been sitting vacant since 2018. It could easily be turned into an emergency shelter and house hundreds, if not 1,000 people or more. It has big industrial kitchens. It's just like that small building just across the street here with the Costco logo. It sits vacant. Why? Because we don't act. We can do these things. We can build housing, but we've got to be smart about it. And then we also need to face up that we have an intergenerational and a senior housing crisis. Seniors that find that they would like to move elsewhere find they can't afford to move elsewhere. You know who's got to figure that out? The Muckleshoots. What they have done is they've said, if you're an Elk Tribe older, they define it as somebody 55 or older, we'll build you a house with a caretaker unit right in it. If you're not a Muckleshoot, you're a Muckleshoot member but don't own property, we'll still build you that house, but we'll give it to you on a lease-to-own program. The county ought to look at how we pilot things like that to make it more available. There's also a way that we can use the revenue stream from property taxes that people pay and the fees that they pay on those that are outlandish to the service providers, and use that to create a community reinvestment fund. And that's the kind of things I'll bring to the table as your next county executive.
Claudia.
Thank you. You started the question by asking what are the drivers of homelessness, the drivers of the cost of housing. And I want to say, because this is something we debate, homelessness is a housing problem. People want to say that homelessness is a drug addiction problem or a mental health problem. Other regions in this county, in this country, have mental health issues as we do, have drug addiction issues as we do. What they don't have is sky-high housing prices. And that's what is correlated with homelessness. And so, if we want to fix our housing costs, if we want to fix homelessness, we need to provide more housing, and we need to provide more housing of more types that people can afford. I'm the only candidate sitting here who has actually done this. There's a lot of ideas, a lot of complaints, but I will say, I have advocated for policies and programs and projects and funding for projects that have created over 3,000 homes right near Light Rail, that have created the capacity by organizing with all of the cities, by organizing with housing providers and big employers and advocates like Futurewise. We have pushed our state and our county towards planning for more housing, hundreds of thousands of more units of capacity within our comprehensive plans that will come out of the ground. I worked in my community to create the first ever suite of homelessness shelters in East King County. We did hundreds of beds for men, for women, for children, and permanent supportive housing, the first ever in East King County. And if you think that was easy, I've got some videos I'm going to send you links to, hours of them. because it's really hard to do. We know the playbook, we wrote the playbook. We had a task force that we pulled together as partners with the cities, and we wrote the playbook. We have to walk the walk. It's not as easy as people make it sound. It's doable, but we need to pull together, and we need to advocate for the hard decisions and investments that need to be made.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask you guys one more question, and then we're gonna go to the audience. Okay, and John, you're gonna start on this one. King County has a track record of leadership on forest management and forest carbon, including establishing a forest carbon program, supporting conservation of mature forests on state trust lands, and adopting a wildfire risk reduction strategy. Now the question, how would you build on these existing efforts to promote the ecological and social benefits from healthy forests for the people, wildlife, and ecosystem of King County?
I think you want to look at what is working and figure out how you amplify that and build it out. I think we need to be constantly reminded that we have to be stewards for that forest, to constantly be nurturing it, reinvigorating it, and protecting it. We see what happens when we don't take adequate care of the forest, that we see terrible wildfires. And, we once long lived in the delusion that that was an Eastern Washington problem, but it's crossed the Cascades. And we've got to recognize that climate knows no boundary. And that, so I think, I'd want to sit down with people and find out what's the best science to approach this. What's the best things that we've done that we know work, and let's figure out how we do more of that more effectively to make sure that we protect the forests that we so value.
Thanks, John. Claudia.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is the thing we love about where we live. We love the trees, we love the forests, we as I said at the beginning, it is our generation's ethical imperative to protect and pass along what we have received. And there's a number of things that King County can do and has done and should do more of. I was very privileged to serve for a long time on the council with Dave Upthegrove as my next door neighbor. Of course, he's gone on to be our state lands commissioner, and he led a number of efforts that I supported to protect our legacy forests that remain. These are the forests that are not the old growth forests, but they're not the newer forests either, and they were very susceptible to logging. And so we took action while we've been on the council to protect those legacy forests. So we stopped some sales, and we have to replace them because, of course, forest timber sales support the schools in the state. But we can preserve those older mid-growth trees while we still fund our schools. Stewardship is a huge challenge for us. King County has been good at land preservation. I've been a strong proponent of the Conservation Futures Tax, updating it, upping it, and using it to preserve land. We need to now take care and steward the land that we've preserved. Efforts like the Mountains of Sound Greenway, I see you folks here tonight, are a part of this because you're preserving forest land outside of in King County as well. We could work with our tribal partners better to use stewardship practices that have proven the test of time. And I will say a few folks have mentioned transfer of development rights, or TDRs. It's another way to protect forest land. I was very proud to be part of the first agreement between King County and the city to try a local TDR where we took more development capacity in the city of Bellevue in exchange for preserving forest land outside of Enumclaw. Sorry, it's got zero. Stop there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, Girmay.
We absolutely need to continue buying forests and preserving and protecting them. That's number one. King County has a great program for doing that. I would expand and retain those types of programs. Also, when it comes to private owners of forest land, we need to regulate them better and also teach them better how to maintain those forests, especially when it comes to wildfire risk. I know that the wildfire risk mitigation strategy is going to be a big part of our strategic climate action plan update coming up, and part of that is going out there and helping private owners learn how to clear away brush and be better prepared for wildfire. Also, when it comes to communities that live along the border of forests and urban areas, or rural areas where people actually live, we need to have them be better prepared for wildfires as well. You know, emergency preparedness, strengthening coordination across different emergency response systems, those are all things that we should be doing. Buying and preserving forest land, working with private owners to make sure that they are implementing best practices, and also protecting our communities that live alongside forest land as well.
Thanks so much. We're now going to move on to the audience submitted questions. In the interest of time, we've combined some of these and we've focused on topics we haven't previously covered. Thank you everyone for bravely submitting your questions. We really appreciate it. And if yours is not featured, it's still a great question. We just have limited time.
Okay, so I guess that means we're in the lightning round, but you still get 2 minutes, please. And this one will start with Girmay. Let's see, I haven't looked at these yet, so I'll start with the top one. While Sound Transit is working hard to expand transit, many cities still lack good bus service around town. Currently, cities are limited in their capacity to create transit. Would you support allowing cities to run their own buses?
No good answer here, huh? It's a trap. I think our transit systems are most effective when they are regionalized. And so I would continue to make sure that we have a strong regional public transit system, a strong metro transit system that is supported and getting the revenues we need to fully fund Metro Connect so we can expand thousands of hours of service, thousands of service hours out into our entire region. I would also make sure that Sound Transit is reaching out into every corner of our multi-county region. And I think this is the best system possible because we want a fully integrated system where you have, you know, one card that you can tap and get from place to place. I also think that we need more first mile, last mile options and more multimodal options for areas that are not fully connected. So more bike infrastructure, more scooter infrastructure, more safe pedestrian pathways for our pedestrians and our wheelchair users. Those are all things that I support. Can I see a system where there are small scale local options? Sure, I think that could be possible, but at the end of the day, I think we need a strong regional, fully integrated system.
John?
Yeah, as far as the creation of small local transit districts, no. For much the same reason, Girmay. Transportation needs to be approached regionally. Now, I think also both Metro and Sound Transit are going to need to look very clearly at the future and how transportation is going to change over the next 5 to 10 years. And it's already changing. We cannot have our heads in the sand on this. We've got to recognize that autonomous vehicles are coming. Now, how we deal with that in our workforce is going to be one of the challenges that the next executive is going to face. But the answer is, let's not bust the transit system into 500 different little pieces and hope that you get a system, you get a system. This is not the Oprah Winfrey show, okay? What we need to do is actually figure out how do we make it an integrated system that gets people to where they go. And that may mean that what we have to do is look at smaller vehicles that have greater frequency, that we look at different routing systems than we've had, that we recognize that we need to be thinking about what 5, 10 years from now. One of the problems so often that we have in local governments and have with transportation is we tend to plan it by only looking in the rearview mirror of what has been. That's great as long as you're on a straightaway, but that first curve is a killer. And we've got to recognize that we're headed for some sharp curves in the next few years, and we've got to be looking ahead, not backwards.
Thank you. We've been at this for an hour and 35 minutes, and we've arrived at a policy difference.
Wedge issue.
Wedge issue, here it is. I would be happy to support cities in running small local buses if that works within their jurisdictions. There's no reason not to do that. We're not talking about creating new districts or new funding sources. So there are examples of this. There was one outside the Woodville area that somebody used to run. I don't know if she does that anymore or not. It's a little shuttle bus. There's a bellhop connector that circulates around downtown Bellevue. Many cities, especially as they grow their urban cores, have a dream of some kind of a local connector. Big employers run bus systems. They do. They run shuttles. Microsoft runs a shuttle. Amazon runs a shuttle. They're not the only ones. T-Mobile's got the pink ones, right? And so there's nothing wrong with it. We do have to work together. We have to work together. It is really important that the regional transit system runs regional transit, fast, frequent, reliable. These are the freeways of the transit system. And then you've got Metro and others that run buses. These are the heavy arterials of the transit system. But if you want to have a small arterial or a local road, of the bus system, have at it. Once upon a time, the county ran a levy that said, we'll partner with you cities. We'll actually give you some money to help you do that last mile because you're the one who understands where your people are and they need to get from the transit center where Metro stops to people's homes that they can ride. I think it's a great idea and a potential partnership. I do want to fact check one thing though. It's a very common misconception that lots of smaller buses everywhere would be cheaper than the bigger buses. It is the opposite. The big cost in transit is not the coach, it's not the maintenance or the fuel, it's the operator. And so as long as you have to pay an operator for every bus, if you add more, it costs more whether they're small or large. But yeah, I'd partner with cities on more buses.
Okay, this is going to be a change in direction, and we'll start with John on this one. And the subject is public safety and behavioral health. King County faces multiple complex challenges relating to public safety, including rising gun violence and a behavioral health crisis. How will you integrate law enforcement, mental health services, and community-based solutions to address these issues holistically? And what are your strategies for ensuring equitable access to these services across all communities in King County?
So this is where the executive has to show that he or she is the principal law enforcement officer of the county, and we not fob it off to a director of public safety. What I do is, frankly, I would bring the key parties together of the prosecutor, the sheriff, local governments, unions, and others, including also mental health workers and that, and sit down and let's figure out, first of all, how we establish that we're no longer going to tolerate our bus system becoming a rolling fountain all day. That stops, period. Not maybe, but stops. And that we put in place a system where as we move people through, we actually either get them into treatment, which they desperately need, which means we have to adequately fund public safety so that we have sufficient public defenders to represent those people, to give them the opportunity to get the treatment. If they will not take the treatment in that, they go to jail. And in some cases, we have people that frankly are multiple repeat offenders that we need to get off our streets. Sean Yin, the Metro driver that was killed last December, should have never been killed. He was killed by somebody that had killed his domestic partner a year earlier, and the prosecutor took a pass on filing charges. Shame on them. That's not how we create a safe community. And it's not how we take care of those who are our most vulnerable. And we certainly should. We don't need to be hard-hearted. We don't need to treat our fellow citizens that are finding themselves in great distress, because heaven knows, almost all of us, it's mental health month. We all know somebody in our family and our relations and that have mental health concerns and that. And we ought to show how we can be both, use common sense and compassion.
Thank you. Claudia.
Thank you. This is the top of mind question that I hear the most from my constituents all the time. And it is not something that we can solve in 2 minutes. I'm going to just give a really high-level response. And that is, we need a full spectrum yes and response to all of these challenges. And I'll start on the responsive law enforcement end because that's where the question started. I am the only person in this race who has actually served in a law enforcement organization. I worked with the Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention for many years. And I ran it for a few years. And I will tell you, we need police, we need jails, we need courts, we need a system to respond when people engage in dangerous behavior. And we need to build that system back to where it needs to be. We need to have enough police and everyone in all those systems, and they need to be well trained. We also need to build our co-response models, and that's a newer term. It means the right response to the right problem. When someone's having a mental health crisis, They don't need a badge and a gun. They need somebody who can help them with their mental health crisis. And we are just starting to roll those kinds of programs out. I was very proud to be part of a 5-4 split vote that funded the first one of these in King County, and that was what is now called the RACER program. It's the right approach, and King County needs to continue to stand up ours, which is just starting. And we need to invest in drug treatment and all the kinds of interventions people need to succeed. And even further upstream, research shows that the things that are most associated with helping people stay out of criminal involvement are things like pre and postnatal nursing programs. You literally cannot start early enough to help people succeed in life. And so we need to do all of these things. Ask us how. That's a good question. And we can talk about that for another 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Girmay.
Thanks so much. In the first year on the council, I sat down with the prosecutor's office and they showed me a map of where the highest rates of gun violence are happening. And then they showed me a map of the lowest income or underserved areas in our region. And it was almost the exact same map. That tells you everything you need to know. So first and foremost, the next executive is going to have to invest in community safety by investing in the things that keep communities safe. I don't have a timer anymore, so I get to speak on it. So we need to begin with stable housing, mental health access, good education, and all of the things that really bring communities to life. Shout out to Representative Don Mason, who's bringing our communities out to Red Barn Ranch to teach young people in the urban areas about the environment and give them activities and jobs. Those are the types of things we need to invest in first and foremost. Next, when we're talking about people who are actually getting into trouble, we do need a functioning criminal justice system. Because of the pandemic, we still have backlogs, we still have staffing shortages that are really creating bottlenecks in our criminal justice system and not allowing people to have access to justice. We need to fix that. And then we need to think about the people who are going to jail repeatedly, you know, what they call the repeat offenders. 10 years ago, King County did a study called Familiar Faces on the 2,500 people who went to jail 4 times or more in the span of 2 years. Out of those 2,500 people, 94% of them had chronic mental health and substance use disorder issues. And out of that 94%, 74% had no ongoing care. And in fact, incarceration was disrupting their care. And so the people who we are calling chronic users of the criminal justice system or repeat offenders, these are really people who need targeted intervention, mental health resources, and substance use disorder care, and we need to do that in a very scientific and targeted way where every person has a case manager and everybody has an individualized care plan, especially while they're in our custody, because just releasing them back out to go on and keep going through this cycle is not a good strategy. I was proud to be the prime sponsor and champion of the Crisis Care Centers initiative, so we can build recovery centers around the region and invest in mobile crisis responders to go out on site and help people who are going through some of these issues and give them the care and the plan that they need to recover. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, this is also a different topic, and Claudia, we'll start with you on this one. I think the county is supposed to do everything. I'll just say that. There's no sustainability without investing in our youth. What ways will you assure all children have the experiences the privileged among us guarantee their children?
Fantastic question, and it segues directly from the last question, really. It's sort of segueing from public safety and crime and how we get people to succeed. Everybody needs hope. Young people need hope. They need to see a path to a future and see themselves on it. They need to see a path to being able to have a successful life, make money, live well. They need activities to be social, to get out all that energy that young people have. I've got a 19-year-old who's slowing down a little bit, not like in the senior sense, but not the way he was at 13. 13 was wild. 13 will be wild. Wait. It only goes on. And so, and King County has a ruling virtually all of this. To your point, Sally, we have the parks. We have a park system. We have a parks levy. I was so proud When representatives of the cities and the county got together for the last parks levy, which I helped to champion and sponsor, and they figured out a way, cities typically demand, I put X amount of dollars into your levy, I want Y amount of dollars out. And so what we said was, you know what, we need to invest more in the places where people don't have access, where they don't have green space outside, they don't have parks, they don't have recreation. We need to invest more there. We don't need to invest more in places like Bellevue, which has an incredibly robust park system already. And the cities agreed to that, and we started the equity program within our parks levy. We need to do more of that, and do it not just for parks, but for education. There's a program called PASTA, very unfortunately named. It comes from Sound Transit. It's something I also help to lead, where we invest in programs for early learning and education, especially in places where there are fewer opportunities. I'm sorry, that's a 7. All of the above, it's a lot, but King County can do a lot, and we need to continue to focus on these things.
Thank you. Remind.
When I was a child, I lived in South Seattle, and then when I became a teenager, we moved south to Skyway. And even though I lived in low-income neighborhoods in South Seattle, I didn't understand what being underserved meant until I moved to Unincorporated King County in Skyway. When I was in South Seattle, yeah, we lived in public housing, but we had buses, we had community centers, we had after-school activities. We moved to Skyway, suddenly we had one infrequent bus line that was almost non-existent over the weekends, no community centers, no gathering spaces, and I would consider that some of the most damaging years of my life. The isolation that we felt as kids, especially because our parents weren't home because they were working multiple jobs a day to make ends meet. We got lucky. We just stayed home, and yeah, there were some emotional isolation issues that came about that, but I saw a lot of kids in my neighborhood who went on the wrong track, joining gangs, getting involved in gun violence, just not making it in life. And you think about it for a moment, and that was a public policy decision, that outcome for them. And so absolutely, we will have the power to shape the lives of youth. And that's why when I first got into office, the first thing I did was champion that unincorporated community. And within a year of my time on the council, we were able to get $10 million for the first Skyway Community Center, millions of dollars for the first Skyway Resource Center, millions of dollars to expand public transit in that community, millions of dollars to expand affordable housing. And so slowly we are creating a public policy of hope rather than a public policy of devastation that impacted me as a young person. And so we need to give our young people things to do. We need to give them educational opportunities. We need to give them hope. We need to give them jobs. And those are all things that the King County Executive can contribute to through strong, thoughtful public policy.
Okay, and John.
So I'm going to address this from both a county official and a parent. And a couple of things. I think one of the things as a county official that we need to carry on and expand is best starts for kids. That something Dal brought forward that I think was a great idea, because we know from research that we need to engage and intervene in helping people raise children from the get-go, not after they're 5 or 6 years old, but literally as you're bringing them home from the hospital, and making sure that they have the resources you need to raise that kid, to provide the child with the nutritional needs, the emotional needs, all the things that make for a healthy individual. And the county's done a great job of that. We can do better. We need to do more. We should look at how we can touch people. We proposed once and it went nowhere, but frankly, you could these days give somebody a smartphone that has child-friendly resources immediately available that would allow you to tap in quickly to where you needed to find this or that. That would help. Because I think for a lot of firstborn parents, it is a daunting task trying to figure out, well, where do I find this? Where do I find that? The other thing, having raised 4 kids, is accountability. My kids have learned that your actions have consequences, and that you need to be held accountable for them, and that is part of your responsibility to yourself, to your family, and to your community. And that's part of what we've got to make sure young people understand, that they're accountable for their actions. Yes, for God's sake, let's try to do our best to give them the launch, the hope that they can, but let's make sure also they understand that they're accountable for their behavior and that they should carry through on that.
Okay, we're gonna bring it home with the last question to all of you. Done very, very well. And that really is, is there anything you'd like to share with us that you haven't already as we bring this home? So this will be your final question. We'll start with Girmay and go to John and Claudia. Girmay.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank all of you for bringing us together here. This was a really amazing conversation. When I get home and talk to my wife, I'm going to say, yeah, marathons take a lot of stamina, but have you ever done a candidate forum in Issaquah? But this was really great because it was an opportunity for me to come out here and build relationships with a district that I don't represent right now. The next King County executive cannot just focus on the issues that they have known in their district. You really have to be a strong regional leader. And for me, that means building relationships of trust and authenticity. That means that every single one of you in this audience, if you invite me to come somewhere that I don't represent right now, I will come. If you ask me to think about an issue that I haven't learned yet, I will learn it. I want to partner with every single one of you to build a region that is one region where every single person has access to safety and opportunity. And that is what we have at stake right now. We are living in a time where we're facing more issues than many generations before us. We are facing astronomical cost of living, a massive shortage of affordable housing, a behavioral health crisis that is taking way too many lives too early, a public safety crisis where last year I think we broke our all-time youth firearm homicide record, and the climate crisis is not something that is abstract anymore. And on top of all of these local existing issues, we now have a federal government that is coming in and trying to ravage every single value that we hold dear in this region and making our budget crisis much worse. And so we are going to have to work together. We're going to have to be thoughtful. We're going to have to keep in mind the communities that are most impacted by each and every one of these issues. And we have to build the future that we can be proud of. Build more housing, build more public transit, build more public health facilities, protect our environment, and make sure that every single person can live the life that they were meant to live right here in King County. Thank you.
Thanks, Girmay. We can clap for it.
Well, again, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. You win some kind of endurance award, certainly, and so do my two colleagues. Look, we have some differences of opinion, but I think we all share fairly common values. This is an amazing region, and we all treasure what we have here, both in terms of the environment, people, the sense of who we are. And you see that as you travel elsewhere around the nation. But you also recognize that we cannot take our future for granted, and that we have critical issues ahead of us in terms of public safety, housing affordability, homelessness, mental health, a variety of things that mean we have to not just talk the talk, we've got to get things done. And the next King County executive has to be somebody that is going to move to action. When I ran for assessor in 2015, I ran and I beat the incumbent in 17 of 17 legislative districts. And part of how I did that is I said I would be an activist assessor, and I have been. I have gone to Olympia and I have fought for you, both as homeowners and renters and members of our community. I've been active in the National Association, fighting for justice as far as our immigration system, and that sitting on a task force director for that. I have taken steps tangibly that have tried to improve this community and deal with the housing crisis we have. I ask for your support in having me help us as a community and work in partnership with each and every one of you to make this truly the amazing county we want it to be. Thank you.
Well, this has been a really outstanding discussion. I thank you all for being here. I thank you for your questions, your curiosity, and for caring about this race in May. It's going to be a long race. I am running for county executive because I believe that local government a critical role in making our community work, in making things better. And it's an implementation job. It's a working job. I've dedicated my life to local government, and this is the final job that I hope to have to make things better for all of us. I have been a leader in my time on water quality, critical areas, shoreline master plans, land preservation, local action on climate, habitat restoration. Didn't get to talk about my kokanee, my beloved kokanee, and how hard we're fighting to keep them alive. We got some good numbers recently. On transit and urban growth and infill and housing, I have worked on all of these issues. On transit, we talked about transfer of development rights, and today I am working to stand up to the federal government and fight for our rights. Just this week, we took another vote to, rather than accept that we should go against our own values in order to accept the federal money that's offered, we're going to sue. We voted at Sound Transit to join a lawsuit to say you cannot use federal transit agency money to stop us from undoing racist planning and racist systems that have appeared very much in our transportation system over the decades. I want to continue this fight. I want to continue this work. I know that I can be an effective county executive on all of the issues that we care about. I really look forward to working with you no matter what happens here, and thank you so much for all of your attention tonight. I look forward to seeing you out there on the campaign trail.
Well, I'm even prouder than I was when I started to be a King County resident. I have 3 well-qualified people running for county executive in this place that we love so much. It has a richness of biodiversity and human diversity and trailhead direct, so you can get from some of those challenged communities out into the forest. I hope that's still going on. Looking at John for affirmation. Okay, good, just started up again. And we have a place where you don't have to be wealthy to have your kids enjoy a great natural experience in the outdoors. So please join me in giving another huge round of applause for these 3 candidates. Okay, and thanks to all of you for coming in. I'm guessing
One
there's
more
still a bunch
thing.
of treats out there.
We got to give a round of applause to Secretary.